In an age where Christian nationalism is clawing at the foundations of our democracy, we're here to push back with evidence, with reason, and yes, with kindness. This is the Atheist Experience, where faith meets facts. We take your calls live, strip away the excuses, and put every claim under the harsh light of reason. If it's true, it survives. If it's nonsense, it doesn't. We attack ideas, not people. So step up, make your case for what you believe, and more importantly, why, because the show starts now. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Atheist Experience. Today is August 10th, 2025. I am your host, the Cross Examiner. And with me today, a very special guest, the blind Limey. Jamie, how are you doing?
I have put on my big boy trousers and I am ready to go.
Not your big boy kilt? We were just talking about kilts.
That's a potential thing for the Bat Cruise, which we will be talking about in a bit.
Bat Cruise?
Yes.
Well, we should say before we get into that the Atheist Experience is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And they put on an annual Bat Cruise that we should talk about. The Bat Cruise is coming up fast. It's August 16th in Austin at 7 p.m. local time. There's the slide. Tickets are selling out very quickly. We only have a dozen or so left, so please grab them now, as one of our producers said, toot sweet, to get yours today so you can join people like me, I think Jamie, are you going to be there?
Oh, yeah, I'm Austin local, so I'll be there. Yeah.
Excellent. Scott is one of our hosts here. He's backing us up today. He'll be there. And lots of people will be there. Caitlin, Jonathan R., Kelly, all sorts of people who already got their tickets will be there as well. If you're not able to attend, you can still help out by donating underneath the live chat to purchase a ticket for one of our hosts or crew. That would really help them out. So visit tiny.cc/batcruise to get your tickets, and we'll see you on the boat. Have you been before, Jamie?
This will be my third year.
Excellent.
It has always been one of the highlights of my year. Last year was particularly excellent because not only did a bunch of people come and I got to sort of talk to people in person that I don't get to speak to very often, your Forest Val guys and your SRs and all the luminaries. It's basically a 2-day long party. There's live showings and people, and we mingle. But after the Sunday shows wrapped, we all went out for our sort of goodbye sort of evening.
Yeah.
And the sensible people went back to their hotel rooms. But myself, Secular Rarity, J Mike, and a couple of other people from the Bat Cruise people who'd gathered, we all went downtown to the 4th Street in Austin, which, if you know, is where all the gay bars are. So we went and glammed it up down there, and it was absolutely fantastic. J Mike had never been to a gay bar before, so he was loving it. And can't guarantee that something similar will happen this year, but it's just so nice. It's the reason I go to things like conventions. It's the reason why we have these gatherings. It's just to be in a space where you're just surrounded by like-minded people and you know you can just be yourself. And just to say that while it may seem like, a dozen tickets left, that sounds like there's plenty. If last year and the year before are anything to go by, they get snapped up quick in the last week.
Yeah, it's a dozen out of 100 or 200. So yeah, grab them while you can. This will be my first year. I was supposed to go last year. I tested positive for COVID the night before, so I had to scrap everything. So I'm really looking forward. But I think you buried the headline. You called SR and J Mike not sensible. They were in the not sensible crew that decided to go out afterwards. So we're gonna have to follow up with that. All right, so I'm so glad you're here. We have a caller. We're going to jump straight in. We'll do more announcements later. We have James from Louisiana right now. His note is, how can we discern straightforward facts versus metaphors in the Bible when discussing things with theists? So I'll ask you, James, him from Louisiana, did I have your question right? I can't
pretty
hear
much,
it.
yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Hi, James. So pretty much, yeah. Do you want to expand on that question?
Hi. Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I am an atheist, and sometimes I do end up having discussions with some theists that I know. And one thing that I cannot seem to quite vocalize properly, I guess you could say, is how do you tell what's poetry or not to be taken literally versus what actually happened when most of it's written as though it's literal, like it actually happened?
I understand. That is a common frustration. Jamie, would you like to take the first crack at it? I know my method.
So there's things in the Bible that can be independently verified. You know, we know that certain places exist and certain events actually happened. But anything that can't be verified, we have to take as just a story. I would always proportion my belief that the thing actually happened as to how much evidence we have outside of the Bible for it. The only other problem is that, oh no, it's just a metaphor, trust me, bro, is honestly one of the most frustrating tactics that are used by theists when you start pointing out things in the Bible that are either contradictory or immoral or just generally heinous. Like the amount of people that say that the scourging of the what were the ones? Pick a genocide, basically, in the Bible. No, that's just metaphor. That didn't actually happen. Or the plagues of Egypt, they were just metaphors. They will conveniently make things that, if they actually happened and were ordered by the all-powerful ruler of the universe, would have been horrifically monstrous, and just say, nah, that's just a metaphor, mate. But then when it's a man shall not lie with another man, and they really want to push their homophobic agenda, no, that's literal, and that's not a metaphor, that's absolutely literal. And we have a set of moving goalposts here on the set for a reason, because they keep moving them goalposts, unfortunately. What do you think, CE?
I think that's a great take. I always struggle with this, to be honest, James, because I was not raised in a religious household. We had some exposure, but during my youth, I just assumed there was some sort of instructions, some division between the stories, the metaphors, and the truth. And as you have recognized, there isn't. So what I do when I'm talking with people, if they claim that X is a metaphor, right? And it comes up commonly because one of my favorite topics is the efficacy of intercessory prayer. So intercessory prayer is when you're asking God to intercede with something on your behalf. So commonly it's like, okay, my father is in the hospital with a heart attack. Please make him better, right? So the power of prayer. And when people talk about that, they know that it doesn't work. Like all the studies show that the prayer is ineffective. The Templeton Foundation put on the giant prayer study. If you Google the Great Prayer Study, Templeton Foundation, very religious organization, the biggest study of the power of prayer in the world, in the history. prayer is no different than placebo. And in fact, if you're aware you're being prayed for, you actually statistically might have a worse health outcome. So people tend to know this. So when you point at the Bible where it says something like, verily, verily, where two or more of you are together in my name, anything is possible through prayer. Or if you truly believe and you want to move a mountain, you can move the mountain. Anything you ask for in prayer, if you believe it, will be given to you. All of these phrases, they will say, that's just a metaphor. That's just poetry, as you said. But then I go back to, okay, so why is he saying verily, verily? If you Google verily, verily in the Bible, you see a lot of apologetics trying to get away from that. They will either embrace it and say, when Jesus says verily, or when the writers say verily, they mean truly, truly, verily, verily, verily. But some of them will say, well, it's a form of amen. They're trying to say amen before the statement to sort of just put their stamp on it, but it doesn't mean truly, sort of try to back off. And then you go to other verses that say, verily, verily, the only way you can be saved is through Christ. And well, in that case, verily, verily means true. So you have to take the time and put in the effort to walk them around through these passages and ask them, how do you tell what the difference is? And what you will end up with is, it's metaphor if it's easily disprovable under today's standards. And if it's not, then it's literally true. That's pretty much what the rule is. Is that what you've experienced, James?
Yeah, so I've called in on a TikTok live about why I don't believe in Catholicism or something. Mm-hmm. And basically they said, why don't you believe? And I said, there's almost no scientific accuracies, listed in the Bible. And I brought up the creation story, plants before the sun and moon being the same size in our atmosphere, and our atmosphere has a solid dome to keep the waters out, and all of that. And they said, well, you can't take that literally. That's just poetry. And I know it's from an ancient Zoroastrianism, creation myth and stuff, and it was pretty much just piggybacked. But, your book claims it to be true. There's no disclaimer saying, hey, this is just allegory for some greater meaning or something. It's pretty much intended to be, this is the cause of why everything is. And it's patently false and untrue. And, I couldn't seem to verbalize how to show that he was just doing all these intricate dances to get out of, admitting that he was wrong.
I would recommend doing the, explain this to me like I'm 5. Dance, where they start using, that's just a metaphor, that part that I don't like or is obviously false as a metaphor or poetic. And then you can say, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize there was a way that God had instructed us how to differentiate between metaphor and poetry and literal assertions of fact in the Bible, because the Bible asserts facts all over the place. They asserted that miracles happen. They assert that, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe and accept in Jesus Christ in various forms. They assert that it's okay to own slaves. They assert all sorts of things. And then you ask them, the person who's making the claim that the Bible is true and is asserting facts, how do I tell? What is the consistent rule that God has given us to discern what is flowery language and what is the assertion of facts and the guideline for the most important question in the history of all the universe? If it's true, how do we get to an afterlife? And they won't be able to give you a rule. At least let me not straw man anybody or put words in people's mouths. I have asked that question many times. I have never heard anybody be able to give me a cogent response that is a consistent rule. When in doubt, these are the signals. If we say verily, it's true. If not, it's false or it's metaphor or whatever. They won't go there because verily is used to identify lots of things that are demonstrably false today. So that's the only way I can deal with it, is to say, you just wiping something away as metaphor calls into question in our discussion the whole concept of, oh, so this whole thing isn't literal. And then I want to jump back to Jamie here, but one other point that's related to that. There are millions of Christians who disagree with whomever you're talking about which one is literal, right? I could cite the Westover Baptist Church folks the one thing I applaud them for is taking the fewest liberties with interpreting the Bible. They just say the Bible is literally true, and they go from there, and they end up as being racist, misogynistic, really awful people, but they don't do what your people are doing. It's like, well, that's obviously false, so I'm going to call it metaphor. They don't do that. They say, no, it's literally true, and you only think it's false because you're being deceived by by Satan or something like that. So that's another tactic you can use. It's like, well, what do you say to Christians who disagree with you about whether this is literally true or not? Anything to add there, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, if it was so cut and dried and clear what's a metaphor and what's not, we wouldn't have all of the different denominations and sectarian violence and all this kind of stuff. And boy, oh boy, ask me how I know that stuff gets real serious. But if you think that the person you're speaking to may be amenable to it, you might want to ask them to look at this text, and let's just take it on a textual level. And if they can detach themselves a little bit from it and go, look at it from my perspective as someone who doesn't believe that this is anything but stories, the historical fiction. Let's read one of these passages, one of these stories, and then break it down. You can do it with Genesis. Do that. The one I've recently been reading for a little side project is 2 Kings 2. That's the story of Elijah and Elisha. And at one point during that story, Elijah is literally, and it's a point of fact in the story that it's a literal happening, taken up to heaven in fiery chariots with fiery horses in a whirlwind. Well, this is a physical thing that happened, according to the book. And you say, well, try and see it from my perspective, where I'm reading that an old man was taken up literally, physically, in a whirlwind on a flaming chariot pulled by a flaming horse. Now, how do I know that that's not a literal thing? How do I know it's a metaphor? Can you break that down for me? Can you not see how wild that sounds and how unbelievable it is to someone who doesn't have a presupposition that everything in this book is either true or a metaphor for something else that's true?
That's an excellent point. What are your thoughts there, James?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. One other thing you can also do is writing on top of that is to ask them about other religions, right? And if they don't believe the Quran, for example, right, where the moon was split in two, and obviously it's not split in two, and I don't think it ever says it, and it was put back together. You would hear the same thing in other religions. Oh, that's metaphor, that's poetry, et cetera, et cetera. But this other part about women being subservient, no, those are literal instructions, and you can say, you find that laughable, but you don't find it laughable when you do it. Have you ever run into that with the people you've been conversing with?
Not really. A lot of them, they just pretty much ask me for my, opinions and stuff, and they may chime in every now and then. But I'm not much of a debater, talker, or whatever. And that live that I explained earlier, that was the first time I ever actually had an actual debate. And, I'm not used to having to, dig into other people's belief systems and whatever. And so I was just trying to get some advice.
Yeah, TikTok lives are a pretty difficult debate space. I mean, yep. I've gotten in, and we try and be as even-handed on this show as we can, but I've been in Christians' lives, and it's varied in quality of how well I was treated. And they are often just looking to get a gotcha. You're not there they're not honestly wanting to know your opinion. What they're doing is they're trying to maneuver you into a position where they can slam dunk you and big up their own preconceptions. So if you can find ones, you might want to try, like, if you have friends who are Christian, or and wouldn't mind talking about this, or even not do it about Christianity, like any other belief that seems a little bit unfounded. Like maybe have a friend who believes that the moon landing was faked, or some other thing that is difficult to think. Like, have them make it make sense to you if they can, and especially when it comes to things like interpreting religious texts, as Graham was saying, as Cross Examiner was saying. Do a textual, like, right, we'll leave the Bible alone. Let's have a look at, I don't know, a passage from the Bhagavad Gita or Norse mythology or something. How do we know that this didn't actually happen? How do we know that it's only metaphor? Let's go on this journey together, shall we?
Really, the problem you have is they're asserting that prayer works, that God created the universe, that the earth is 6,000 or 10,000 years old, whatever crazy thing they're asserting. And if you're not comfortable engaging in, logical syllogisms and things like that, you can always take the Socratic approach of just asking questions. People will tend to engage with you if you ask sincere questions. If they say, well, why aren't you answering? You're like, I'll answer any question you have, but I don't know what I believe. That's why I'm talking to you. Could you please explain to me why or how X? And then just have them do it. And then think of, okay, the part that doesn't make sense, and then say, oh, okay, well, what about ABC? And just hear what they say. And sometimes that can cause them to end up going in a circle. I will point you, my favorite one to go at with this is Matthew 21. I think it's 21. Let me check. Yeah, Matthew 21, verse 21. So 21:21, and I'll read it to you, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. Jesus replied, quote, truly, so I'm looking at the NIV, so it'll be verily in the King James. Truly, there's that signifier. I tell you, if you have the faith and do not doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, he did some stuff to the fig tree because he didn't like the fact that it didn't give him figs, but you can also say this to the mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, quote, quote, and it will be done. If you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer. So, first you ask him, do you truly believe? Then hit him with this. Say, well, could you please explain Matthew 21:21 to me, where Jesus not only says that prayer works, but that if you believe it will be done, you can make a mountain go into the sea. And not only does he say that, he says truly before it. What's the point of saying truly if it's not true? Are you calling Jesus a liar? Yeah. So that's what I tend to do. What are your thoughts, James, before we move on?
Hello?
Oh, no, it all really makes sense.
Okay.
Sorry. Thought he said Jamie for a second.
Oh, no problem. We have a little delay here, so that's part of the confusion. I just want to make sure. Do you have any other questions? Go ahead.
No, that's all I can really think of. I just wanted to say thank y'all for all y'all's work. I've been an atheist for about 15 years now, but I've been listening to this program for probably about 20, maybe a little bit longer than that. And y'all have really helped me along with logical thinking and things like that. And I'm grateful for all of y'all's hosts, all of y'all's people in the background, and I really appreciate y'all.
We appreciate your
so much.
viewership as well. And don't feel obliged to engage in these conversations if you feel comfortable. Take it from me, there is only misery down this path.
That is very true. I would second that. So thank you so much, James. Please feel free to call back if you have any other questions, or if you want to relate to us any experience you've had when you're interacting with people. But speaking of the people who help us out, I would like to take a moment to thank you, to send thanks. I shouldn't say thank you. I want to thank you, the listeners, but I would like to send a big thank you out to the ACA crew who put this show together every week. Video operators, audio operators, note takers, call screeners, chat moderators, and general rabble rousers, as well as a dog this week. Is this a Scotty dog? I can't tell. Oh, no, is that a cat? Looks like a back of a cat. Okay. I can't tell.
I will get to pet dog. You cannot pet dog.
Oh, no, I can't.
And you are not.
It was my one chance, too. My children are allergic to fur, and my wife doesn't like dogs, so I have to live vicariously through the crew. I can't emphasize this enough. Like, we come on and we talk to people and we do our best to just talk, but it doesn't happen without all the work that the crew does. The crew are all volunteers. Everybody on this show is volunteers. Everybody that works with the ACA are volunteers, except for a very small handful of people. It's a very lean charity. Yep. So to help us out, you can like and subscribe to this video and others. That would really help us get the viewership going. That's one way that we do raise money, is through interactions with ads and things like that. You could also enable notifications. You can comment below to engage with the video. The algorithm loves that. And if you like what you hear here, we should also know that we have a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form. You can go to tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. There you can listen to all the latest shows from the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted, The Nonprofits, and others on one channel. That is another outreach that we try to make available to people, where you can interact and get the content that you're looking for. I don't know. I tend to do all of them, Jamie. I will watch the videos if I have time, but when I'm driving around, I've been driving a little bit more now, I'll listen to the podcast. I'm kind of impressed how well it works pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I stick my oar in for premium, so I tend to just have the videos running in the background. But many a simulated flight across the digital skies has been to the dulcet tones of my colleagues here having a conversation about faith or some other epistemological thing. I remember a wonderful call, the one that spawned the look at the mangoes meme. I was flying up the side of Mount Fuji while I was listening to that. It was great.
I think I was on that call. I think I talked to that guy.
Yeah, and the crew, of course, have been extremely busy because they don't just do the show; they do everything. So we have events here at the library every week. We, of course, have the Bat Cruise coming up, and the same people who are there pushing the buttons and doing the gewgaws and the knobs and the twiddlings are also the people who are arranging things and making sure people are in place to do this stuff, and then everyone has a good time at these events as well. So they're very, very busy, extremely dedicated people who are often doing it for nothing but thanks.
Yep. Absolutely. So we have more callers lined up. We do have some lines open. We'll probably get to you if you call in now, so please do. But next up, we have John, him from California. This is an interesting conversation topic. Watching this show converted him to religions. So why don't we get John on the line? And John from California, did I get your statement correct?
You did. Hey guys,
how's it
going?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Before we start, I kind of just wanted to say, so I've been on this show a couple of times before. That's a pretty bold claim, right? And if it happened to you, you kind of have to call in, right? Like you'd have to at least try. I've had some
bold claim. Which claim was bold? I'm sorry, I didn't hear which claim was bold.
A lot of them. I think so. This show converted me to religion, and then the Bible happened to me in real life is a pretty bold claim. Before we started, the last few times I've called, you guys kind of think that I'm trolling. I'm genuinely not. And to be honest, the only reason I called today was to just be in the queue I like listening to the show. Even if the show doesn't like me, I really like the show. So I was kind of just trying to listen today, but I'd be glad to talk about it if you want to.
Okay, so why don't you tell us what's the biggest reason that watching this show converted you to religion? Maybe we can take a background step and say, before you watched the show, the statement you make implies that you were not religious, and then you watched this show and you became religious. So I think what I'd be eager to hear from you is how that worked, is, not 10 minutes of it, but a sort of high level summary of how that happened. What were the biggest, the one or two biggest factors that convinced you of the truth of some sort of religion? Which religion did you convert to due to watching this show? And where are you now? Why do you believe what you believe now?
Sure. So my background is, when I started watching this show, I was still pretty young. I was like an 18-year-old senior in high school. I actually only came across this show because one of my coworkers, my old boss, showed it to me. He was a pretty cool guy. And, he kind of turned me on to. I really admire this show for the way that you handle logic, the way that you're very careful about, challenging people's premises, and just doing things in a very structured and formal way. I think it's hard to find shows, or, honestly, anything out there that does that in the same way that you guys do. So honestly, it had nothing to do with religion to me at first. I wouldn't say I was an atheist, but I was agnostic. Religion wasn't a super, especially, I was like an 18-year-old. It wasn't a huge factor in my life, and I didn't necessarily take it too seriously. And then, as a joke, after hearing the flying spaghetti monster thing, I started going through the Bible, trying to see if I could pick out like Bible quotes that would support the idea that Jesus is the flying spaghetti monster. And I'm telling you, that shit converted me. I am full blown. I consider myself a biblical literalist, full blown Christian. This has changed my entire worldview. So I'm pretty sure Jesus actually is plants.
Actually is what?
Plants. The flying spaghetti. Some people joke that like the Atheist Experience, the flying spaghetti monster joke goes too far. We're not being nice enough to religious people. As a religious person, I'm saying it doesn't go far enough. This converted me. This is real. This is amazing.
Okay. Jamie, I'm gonna put him on mute here for a second. I don't think there's a legit reason that this person's calling in at this point. Jesus is plants. I'd be eager to hear from Jamie if there's any interest in continuing talking here. But
well, first of all, the flying spaghetti monster is not an invention of the Atheist Community of Austin.
Correct.
It's something we used before. It's just an example of the unfalsifiability of God. We never claim that it's real. And insofar that Jesus, or at least his divinity, is also unfalsifiable, then yeah, I agree. There are some parallels. But there's also parallels to Roland the Closet Goblin behind me, or, Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, or pick any other number of gods we've made up to be an example of unfalsifiability. I'm kind of willing to engage for a little bit, but
all right.
But this is the same John that wanted us to literally, that the daily bread is literally bread, and the Christians should be giving out more actual physical bread, and so. Actually, I want to take this call in a very different direction, John. What do you hope to get out of this call? Are you there?
I'm sorry, the tone cut part of that out.
Yeah. What are you hoping to get out of this call?
Like I said originally, I kind of called in today just to hoping to be in the queue, just trying to listen into the show. You guys don't like me, but I really like the show.
You can listen to the show without being in the queue,
I
Chief.
can walk you through my position.
So
it's easier to call for me just because of my phone. I've had issues getting the live stream working, so sometimes I just call to listen. But
okay,
you're right. I can figure it out elsewhere.
So I'm with Jamie. I can't take you seriously for a couple of reasons. One, the claims you're making are so ridiculous that maybe only you in the world either believe them or are lying about them. And that really is the dichotomy we're dealing with, right? You're lying to us now, which I tend to, at this point, to believe is more likely, but I don't have final evidence of that, so I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. Or you sincerely believe this, in which case I then have to ask myself, what is the usefulness for continuing this conversation? What is the real world implications that some guy that says his name is John from California believes that Jesus is plants or is the literal spaghetti monster, or that Christians should give out literal bread and that's what they're commanded to do? What's the real world implication of that particular fact that you are out there? And it's so minimal compared to the problems that this world is experiencing right now that I don't think our listeners have much interest in hearing this. So I'll give you another chance. I'll ask the same sort of meta question that Jamie was asking. I'm just going to come out and say it. Do you feel guilty at all by calling in and doing this?
Not at all. Like I said, I was hoping I could maybe just listen. I do listen to the show a lot. It's a good show.
Okay. Every time you've answered a question right now, you've answered with, I listen to the show a lot. That's how you started the beginning. That's how you started when I first asked you a question. It's how you started when you answered Jamie's question, is now how you're answering here. That's irrelevant to what we're asking you. I think you should be a little bit, if you truly believe this, good for you. Please don't call back, because I don't think anybody in the world cares. I think it is much more likely that you are not telling the truth. And quite frankly, you should feel some sort of shame or guilt about wasting people's time in an era when we are facing the very real probability that people who genuinely have religious beliefs are going to come to such a point of power in this country that they will be able to enforce their beliefs on others through our government, that the First Amendment is going to go away or not be enforceable anymore. That's the world we live in right now. So as for one guy that likes to say Jesus is the flying spaghetti monster or Jesus is plants, and just call in and say that and then refuse to engage except to say I like the show, you should be, quite frankly, ashamed. Do you have anything else to add, Jamie?
Yeah, if you like the show, as you say you do, then you should know the kinds of questions we would ask of someone that we believe is being sincere. So if I believed that you were being sincere, if I was giving you the benefit of that doubt, I would ask you, two people come to me. Both of them declare that they know that Jesus was real and he is the spaghetti monster or is plant. One of whom actually has the truth, and the other person is either mistaken or lying or trolling. How do I tell the difference? So can you, maybe one last thing before we sort of move on or anything. How do I tell the difference between you? I'm going to give it to you. That I'm going to believe you out of the goodness of my heart that you are actually being sincere. But how do I tell the difference between you and someone else who's saying the same thing and is not being sincere? How do I tell the difference?
That is a really good question.
I know it's a good question. Can you please answer it?
What if I actually legitimately what if I actually start a church with money behind it that I put real effort into based on the idea of free beer and free popcorn for everybody? Like, can I call back in at that point? It's a real thing that you would know about.
That would not prove anything. That may prove the efficacy.
Free beer and free popcorn for everybody.
So John. That may prove your sincerity, but I'm already giving you that. You don't have to start a church. You just have to tell me, how do I tell the difference between someone who's sincere, like you, because you say you are, and I'm believing you, and someone who isn't?
Yeah, so we're dealing with Poe's law here, right? This is what we're struggling with. Like, Poe's law says basically, given any amount of ridiculous claim, when you have fundamentalists in your society, it becomes impossible to distinguish satire from reality with respect to fundamentalist claims. So yours is a crazy out there claim. There's pretty much nothing you can do at this point to show to us that this is a sincerely held belief. other than engaging in honest dialogue. And so far, you come across as very dodgy. You don't answer questions. You just want to talk about, you like the show and you just want to listen. So I guess the one question I have before we go is, if you are insincere, what is the point? What are you trying? It's the same thing that Jamie said. What are you trying to do with this call?
Why would I be doing this if I wasn't sincere?
You would be surprised.
To share my beliefs that I believe are pretty impressive.
So to share beliefs in a vacuum is just sharing for either attention or because I'm gonna mute him a second. So your question was, why would you be doing this if you didn't believe it? You've heard of prank calls, right? You've heard of crank calls. You've heard of people who are just attention seeking. We were just having this conversation between us, the crew, and our backup host, Scott, before the show. Like, why do some of these people call in? Because it's tough to filter out. Poe's law is very strong. It's tough to filter out. But when somebody fails to start engaging, then I don't have to believe or disbelieve their claims. What I can start to do is to doubt the sincerity of their efforts to communicate. The point of this show, in addition to exposing the logical fallacies that are common in religious belief around the world, is to do the things that we say in our mission statement. It's dedicated to the promotion of atheism. It doesn't relate to your calls. The promotion of critical thinking. We're not doing that here, right? You're not engaging in critical thinking. Secular humanism. We haven't talked about that. I don't think that there's really a point in talking about that with your call, because I, again, don't believe that you're sincere. And the separation of religion and government. Taking your call when neither of us really believe that you're sincere really furthers none of those missions. So I think we should just move on. Jamie, do you have any last
No,
comments?
I mean, he had his chance. I'm sorry, John. I gave you very, very... And if you were a fan of the show, as you say you are, you should have seen this coming a mile off, that you have two people giving me the same claim. One of them is sincere, the other one isn't. How do I tell the difference? And all you could say was, that's a good question. I'm like, I fucking know it is. It's why I asked it.
That is a little pet peeve of mine, is when you ask somebody a question and then they go through this preamble of 60 seconds of, well, you see, that's a good question and it made me think a lot. I understand that talking to people live on a stream can be disorienting. It can be odd because maybe you're listening to hold music or some other the lagging of the live show, and then you jump in and people are talking to you and you might need to catch up mentally. Totally get that. We don't bite here. I think you've seen we've tried to give James the benefit of the doubt more than I think I've ever done.
Now, James was the nice man from Louisiana. It's John that was the problem. Yeah. Sorry,
that's
James.
right. Who was this? Yes.
This was John.
So, it's a problem today. Like we're trying here to do good work for society as a whole, because let's face it, religion as a whole tends to be dwindling in the United States, but we have seen throughout history that when religious organizations start shrinking, they start to get more extreme. That's why cults, when they go to the end, I'm not saying Christianity is a cult, but when you study cultism, one of the end games is the compound, the us versus them mentality. The end of the world is near, so we better get right with God. And it turns into this fight for survival, or let's burn the whole thing down because that'll bring about what we want anyway, which is the end of times. We have people in our government today that believe this shit. They are acting on it. They're trying to bring it about. Project 2025 was a playbook right out of the most religious fundamentalist political action committee, or not PAC, political organization dedicated to the furtherance of Christian nationalism in the United States in the history of the United States. So to call in and waste everybody's time with what I'm just going to say, I presume, are lies and bullshit. Maybe you're off giggling in a corner now that I'm still talking about it, but I think it really does raise a real problem of, do we all fiddle while Rome burns, right? Are we all just going to be entertained by engagement rather than engage in actual meaningful conversation that might change minds, might help people figure out how to think clearer, and then translate that into action that will help make the world better? I'm choosing the latter. I think our former caller chose the former.
Yeah, I mean, so when you make patently difficult to swallow claims, even that other Christians wouldn't get on with, you know. I wanted to, just for the sake of the conversation, I wanted to give the benefit of the doubt. Like, yep. I'm going to lay out all of the rope, and you can tie the biggest noose. It's fine. And I feel that yeah, not only is it like it's wasting our time, it's wasting the viewers' time. It's emblematic of a problem that is endemic, that seems to be coursing through, that people are lacking in any kind of empathy, and just taking advantage of people's goodwill for their own amusement, like just get their jollies. I really can't get on board with that, and unfortunately, a lot of the discourse vectors that we have, like the debate scene and even shows like this to some extent, we don't try enough to understand the people we're talking to, and maybe try and at least understand their point of view before we criticize it. And I try and do that. I think you try and do that. Most of the people who work for the ACA are trying to do that. And when someone comes in and takes that goodwill and just uses it as a funny hat, I find that quite offensive. But anyway, that's the thing. I mean, we were talking earlier about how do we deal with this like malaise of engagement over authenticity kind of thing.
Yeah, it's troublesome. I'm working on my show on a new series that's going to hopefully educate people about the Constitution one little clause at a time. I haven't figured out what I'm thinking of it as bite-sized Constitution or something, but the idea of people. I don't want to feel like grandpa kids today, but to some degree, I think the studies bear this out. While we have improved education for humanity as a whole over time, today, given what's at play, people are vastly uneducated when it comes to the important stuff: civics, the legal system, the government, our Constitution. And it's because of that they not only not knowing what it says, but not understanding the context, the history of why the Constitution is so special, why the First Amendment alone is like radical in the entire history of the world. It's the most important law, I think, that has ever been made, that ensures freedom that everybody cherishes. And it comprises not just religious freedom under the Establishment Clause, but it also incorporates the freedom of the press, the freedom of speech. It's all in that First Amendment. There's a reason it's number one, right? That's the most important. So when we have so much content out there that people just gamify it or call in and they want to joke, it can be very frustrating, to be honest. And if that was your objective, was to frustrate me or to frustrate Jamie or frustrate callers, you achieved it. But as I said, you should be ashamed of that. And if you don't feel a little bit of shame, to be honest, there's something wrong with you. That's not a normal human behavior. Grow up and engage with the world around you, because if you don't, other people will, and they don't have your best interests at heart when it comes to things like freedom of religion in this country. It's coming, and we need to be ready for it.
If there are any theists out in the audience that are like hesitant to call in, first, you don't want to let that guy be the last impression of a theist on this
Yes.
that this
Please.
audience experiences. And secondly, we aren't going to bite your head off. Like, I try and be as chill and cool. And as you saw, I'll even grant, for the sake of argument, wild shit just to keep the conversation going in what could be, hopefully, fingers crossed, a constructive direction. Like, I'm a nice guy, but there is a point where you have to sort of draw the line. So we do still have open lines if you want to call us, though. You know,
Yes.
the show does march on.
I do want to let callers know, if you were on the line and you got dropped, that was a problem that we had. I think we've lost the queue, so please do call back in. In the meantime, we do have some, let's call the segment, we get voicemails, we get letters, we get emails. So we do have a few offline interactions that were submitted to us before the show that I think we can address while we're waiting for people to call back in. We have some screenshots. I think we should just start with the first one. My understanding are these are screenshots of messages that were sent to us, emails or posts in our Discord, which is a great way to interact with us. Or maybe there were things said at the Bat Cruise. Oh, I'm hearing music now. So did we make a TikTok out of this? It says, perhaps you should have a talk with retired forensic detective J. Warner Wallace about this subject matter. He might enlighten you. This is in response to a previous show that I think I commented on when I was on the show, and I said eyewitness testimony is not a strong form of evidence. So J. Warner Wallace, I think, I don't want to, I think I have one of his books. I think he's the retired detective. I can Google him. I think he's the retired police detective who's the Cold Case for Christ or something like that.
All right.
J. Warner Wallace. Have you ever read any of his stuff there?
I mean, I'm not nearly as widely read as I would like to be because the physical act of reading books is difficult for me, and audiobooks take time. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I do have this book. It's Cold Case Christianity is the name of the title. A homicide detective investigates the claims of the gospel. To be honest, I was hopeful when I started reading this book, because he was a detective, that he would be investigating the actual claims from a evidentiary standpoint. That is not what he does in the book. If you read that book, just within the first chapter, he abandons every technique that we use in the criminal justice system or the civil justice system, quite frankly, when we come to vetting evidence. He makes the fallacy of saying that eyewitness testimony is reliable, as whoever left this message thinks is true, when in reality the statistics just don't play that out at all. Every lawyer in the world worth their salt will admit that eyewitness testimony is very, very easily corrupted, in the sense of people can truly believe what they think they're testifying about. They can believe their testimony, but they can be mistaken for a wide variety of reasons. So I do not recommend the book unless you can get it from the library, or a friend has it and lend it to you. But again, if you just take a highlighter and go through the first chapter, I should pull it out. It's somewhere over here. We could talk about it. Where did it go? I don't have it ready. It's up here somewhere. It's just filled with inconsistencies. And he held on for like 5-10 paragraphs of talking about his background and why the investigatory method is so important. And then he misapplies it and makes a bunch of unsupported assertions. So have you had any people claim to you, Jamie, that eyewitness testimony is very reliable, that we should believe people because they say they saw something, and B, that claim that anything in the Gospels is in fact eyewitness testimony?
Yeah, that's pretty common. There's an interlocutor who's called in on previous shows who sort of seems to have the standpoint that the eyewitnesses that are mentioned, not only are they eyewitnesses in the Bible, but they are more likely to be telling the truth than would normally be. And I'm like, how you figure that? And it comes, often they'll use arguments like, well, they died for their beliefs, so they must have been true. And it's like, that just means they thought they were true. They believed them enough to put their life on it. But even just being a human being, like going throughout this world and knowing my own flaws, like this terribly put together water cooled meat computer is not great at image retention and recall. Memories are just our brain telling us the closest approximation story of what we actually experienced, and we're unreliable. And there's so, like you said, there's so many reasons people can be completely telling what they think is the truth and be wrong and be mistaken. They don't have to be lying; they could just be wrong. And even just false memories can just be. I think I mentioned this when I was backing up a previous show, that I have a memory, a vivid memory, a memory so clear that I believe that I would withstand physical torment rather than deny that it was real. But I have zero evidence that it actually happened. It was an advert I think happened, but I've never been able to track it down. No one's ever heard of it. And but it was so vivid. But knowing that my mind is fallible, when people say, "Oh no, eyewitness testimony, it's bulletproof," I'm like tissue paper's bulletproof, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, part of what you're describing could fall into the Mandela effect, right? The concept or the experience that many people have had of a societal collective memory that was just absolutely wrong. People in the I think this was in the 90s when it got its name. People thought, they collectively believed that Nelson Mandela had died in prison in the 80s, which was not true. But, people were interviewing people all over the world and they all like, yeah, he died in prison. That's what made him famous. But no, he died in 2013, at a ripe old age.
He ran a country first.
Yeah, exactly. And so they call it the Mandela effect, but there's lots of examples of it. Like, hey, Fruit of the Loom underwear tag doesn't have a cornucopia sign on it.
Van Steen Bears, not the Van Steen Bears.
Yeah, wrong names. Or I remember there was one about a movie, the Shazam movie or something like that, where a famous basketball player was supposed to have played a genie, and that never took place, but people will swear that it happened. So, and that's on just sort of obscure stuff, but just go to a Penn and Teller show, right? And tell me that the ball was under the cup or wasn't under the cup, right? You can't tell, and people will see something, believe that their senses are reliable enough to depend upon it, and then they will swear that that's the truth. And that's not necessarily the problem. The problem is that the finder of fact, the judge or the jury, puts too much weight on a single eyewitness. If you get a whole bunch, maybe it's more reliable. But when you're dealing with the Bible, you don't have any of that. At least with the Gospels. There are no eyewitness testimonies in the Gospels. The Gospels were written by people that we don't know who they are. They are anonymous. Church tradition says it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But if you open up any Bible worth its salt, it will tell you the Christian PhDs who put the Bible together will write and explain to you. We call them Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John because that is church tradition, quote unquote. That's the polite way of saying we used to lie to people and say it was written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John for a long time. And now that people understand that that's impossible, we will just call it church tradition.
And it's not the Gospel of John that literally says at the start, like, I am collecting these stories. Like, yes. It says I'm not an eyewitness.
Yeah, I am not an eyewitness. I am a reporter of stories. Like, he goes that far, like everybody else. And of course, they're all written at least a generation or more after the death of Jesus and the events that they claim they are portrayed. But even if they were, let's say they were talking to eyewitnesses, most of them were not, but let's assume they were. Somebody comes to you and says, yeah, I saw this guy. There was no wine, and all of a sudden he turned the water into wine. Like, okay, is that enough for you to believe that there's an afterlife, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that you know the mind of a being that created the universe and that it wants you to do something. No, it's not. Nobody in their right mind would say that. But it convinces people for some reason.
If eyewitness testimony was so gosh dang reliable, we wouldn't have invented dash cams.
Excellent point. Excellent point. All right, another communication that we got. Let's go with number 3. We'll put that one up. And number 3 says, "Don't you feel shy?" And I think maybe that means ashamed. Oh, here it is. We've got music to it again. At least I'm hearing music. I don't know if you are.
I think so.
"Don't you feel shy when you believe in nothingness created everything by randomness? Do you have brains, or what is up there? LOL." So that's a great question. Do I feel shy / ashamed when I believe in nothingness created everything by randomness? So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jamie. Can you spot the straw men and the false premises?
Well, I might feel ashamed to believe that everything came from nothingness if I believed that. But I don't. What I believe is I don't know where everything came from, because as far as I'm aware, and I'm not a cosmologist, I'm not a physicist, but I trust the evidences that have been put forward by cosmologists and physicists, that there is this thing called the Planck time. It is the smallest amount of time, and before the first Planck time, at the start of the universe, we literally can't know what's happening then, at least under our current models. Math breaks down all this kind of stuff. And in fact, is it not the Christians themselves who believe in creation ex nihilo, because from nothing God made everything? And then we get into special pleading. Man, it's just fallacies all the way down, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. As for the straw man, I am in with you. To believe something is to accept it as true. If you assume that definition of believe, then no, I do not believe that nothingness created everything by randomness. There's like 3 or 4 problems there. Yep. I'm not sure there was ever any nothingness in a way that even makes sense to us. I don't know. And I don't think you as a Christian do either. I think that you assume that God is outside in space and time, and for all intents and purposes has always been and will always be. So there was never any nothingness in your belief system. Maybe there was never any nothingness here. I also think there's a problem with the definition of nothingness. When you speak of nothingness, you're thinking of a different nothingness than most physicists do, of, some sort of quantum field of potentiality is like the only thing that could even exist according to the math. But my answer to that is I don't know, right? I don't know. I don't accept it as true that there was a nothingness, that if there was a nothingness, quote unquote, it had the power to create, much less did create something, everything. And by randomness is another phrase you tacked on there that is meaningless. It's a word that apologists try to throw out there to convince people, usually people who are already convinced. It's just sort of making people feel better about their belief systems.
Yeah, the tornado in a junkyard analogy.
The tornado in a junkyard,
terrible.
Right? Yeah. Just randomness without explaining anything. So I will say what I do believe. I do believe that we know a hell of a lot about what Jamie described, where everything was very, 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 very soon after an event that seems to have been stemming from some sort of singularity, some single point where everything was at that point. And everything since then makes sense. And all the evidence we've ever collected about it says it's true, just like the Catholic priests who proposed the Big Bang, just like the many churches around the world who accept the premise that 14 point whatever billion years ago, everything was in this point. Do I know what happened before that, or even if the concept of before that makes sense? No. Does that mean I think it didn't happen? No. Does I think it means that it created something? No. My answer is I don't know. And that's the point. You should feel a little silly for saying, aren't you ashamed that you believe this thing? When in reality, the adult way to respond to any of those questions is to say, I don't know. But I strongly suspect, based on your mocking attitude, that you would come in and say, I know that God created everything. And that in and of itself is really as you said, you should be a bit shy about that.
Now, as for the no brains up there, you've got me dead to rights. The hamster's on the wheel. His name is Jeff, and he's a good little boy.
Good little hamster up there, huh? All right.
Looks like someone. Oh, we were having someone screened, but they seem to have.
I do have to apologize. We are having technical difficulties with the calls. I saw the call room reset again. I did see a caller pop in and pop out. I don't know if that was a test.
We do want to talk to you. We're not scared.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so let's go on to another. I think we have a voicemail. Yes, we do. So queuing the crew here, we did get a voicemail whose title is "The King James Bible is Proof." So while we're waiting for people to call back in, perhaps we could listen to this voicemail, who's a caller that called earlier, couldn't be during the live show, and see what they have to say. So take it away, crew.
So I wanted to call to just talk to you guys about the teleological argument. I guess that's why I'm leaving this, maybe so that somebody else will hear this and potentially think about it, because there comes a point where if you're dismissing evidence, then you might not be interested in believing. But anyways, so evidence is just an available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true beyond a reasonable doubt. And if something has a low chance of being true, then you probably wouldn't want to believe it, right? Like, if something has a really low chance of being true based on evidence, say with all the evidence we come up with an actual calculation that shows how low of a percentage or how low of a number between 1 and whatever there is of it being true. And so if something has a low chance of being true, you don't want to put your belief in that, right? Which atheism is a belief. Believe means to accept as true. And you guys, as atheists, do accept it as true, the idea that there is no God, right? Thus, it is a belief. And I'm not saying you guys are denying it. I'm just saying. But anyway, so if atheism were to have a low chance of being true based on the evidence, would you still believe it?
So thank you, crew, for that one. I'll take the first hack at this one. I can see you drowning in frustration, Jamie. It's something we get all the time. So eye rolling is appropriate here. So there's several problems here. I do want to thank the caller for calling in, but I do think you need to adjust your definitions a bit, or at least use different words. I'm not going to make an argument from definition here. I can speak for myself, and I think I can speak for Jamie. He'll correct me if I'm wrong. The type of atheism that most people I interact with on this show and in the world is a type that just says, when asked, "Are you convinced that there is a God?" my answer is, "I am not currently convinced." That's it. That's what atheism is. It's like going to court and being a juror and then saying, "Are you convinced that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt?" is a different standard. But let's say, "Are you convinced?" and you say no. You can't turn around and say, "Aha, therefore you think he's innocent," right? No, not guilty means I haven't yet been convinced to whatever standard of proof is on the party making the claim. In criminal cases, that's beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, it's the preponderance of the evidence, like a 51% type of rule. The best, I am going to reach off of my bookcase. The best analogy I ever saw was long ago on this show. Somebody had some marbles. And I would ask you, are you convinced that this jar I'm holding has an odd number of marbles in it? And if you say no, I can say, "Aha, so you are convinced that it's even, right?" No, you're not convinced that it's either. The answer is, I don't know if it's odd or even, because I would have to take them out and count them. And that leads me to your second point, where you start getting into like you said, the teleological arguments, the fine-tuning arguments of that sort of stuff. Anytime anybody brings up with me, "What are the odds? It's so unlikely that whatever," as we were discussing before the show again, Jamie, my first question is, what is your denominator? And I don't mean like in a funny sense. Literally, do the math, show me the math, because your denominator is made up. I will be convinced. If you don't have math to show me, then we can't have a conversation. All you're saying is, this is very unlikely. And that boils down to an argument from personal incredulity, also known as the argument of ignorance. I can't imagine that X would have happened, or that Y would be the likely outcome. Therefore, because I can't imagine it, it couldn't have happened, or it is very unlikely because I can't imagine it. So I'll turn it over to you, Jamie. I'm sure there's more to pick apart here.
I mean, there's examples we can give of counter arguments to the theological argument. The fact that we can point out that you are making the assumption, and we all know about Occam's razors and assumptions, we should make as few as possible. You're making the assumption that the current state of the universe, or life on Earth, or humanity is the goal or target of the processes of the universe, rather than just an effect. The analogy that Douglas Adams gave about the puddle. The water lies in the puddle, and it's like, oh, this puddle is perfect for me. It must have been made just for me. But no, you filled the puddle. It's just the way it is.
And it is my favorite analogy: the sentient puddle waking up and going, "Wow, I fit perfectly into this hole. What are the odds?" And
so as you saw me, my eyes like swiveling. That whole, like, you're an atheist, therefore you believe God doesn't exist. I'm like, no, I don't. It's why we phrased the question in the poll chat today the way we did. It's of the crime of existing, we find God guilty or not guilty, not innocent. It's like,
right.
It's we don't. I don't make positive truth claims unless I'm damn certain I'm ready to back it up with some kind of evidence or convincing argument.
And we should talk about that. Like, this is actually a good caller, even though he's not on the line here, because it's incredibly important to not only this issue, but the issue of dealing with claims made on social media, the rise of AI, fake images and fake videos. Evidence, the concept of evidence, and the concept of sufficiency of the evidence to accept a claim is really, really important. And I don't think enough people organize their thoughts about that. So if you don't mind, I'll sort of mention a few concepts there, and I'd love to get your reaction. So first, the caller said, evidence is just available, an available body of facts or information indicating whether belief or proposition is true beyond a reasonable doubt. So there's lots of definitions of evidence, and I don't like to get into arguments about definitions. I want to make sure you understand my concept, and then we can talk about that concept. So in the legal realm, I find the definition of evidence to be useful. Evidence is anything, any claim or assertion that makes a proposition more likely or less likely to be true. Not that it makes it true beyond a reasonable doubt. So when you look at the federal rules of evidence in the United States, you have to define what evidence is first. Evidence is anything that's going to make something more or less likely true. Well, given that, almost everything is evidence, right? I played tennis. If I testify, I played tennis at the murder trial of the billionaire, they're going to go, how's that evidence? How is that relevant? And you could say, well, the victim was a tennis player and they both went to this, and it's likely that this person knew the terms that we were anything can be evidence under the federal rules of evidence. But then the federal rules of evidence say all evidence is admissible. As long as it's evidence, you can admit it. Okay, so you can admit anything, any testimony is evidence. And then the rest of the federal rules of evidence are exceptions. Except you can't introduce this sort of evidence or that sort of evidence. And it's important to understand how we got there. This wasn't just made up by some professor one year. You may have heard of the thing called the Magna Carta, okay, 800 years ago, however long it was. That was sort of the start of the modern civil justice system, at least in the West, and that was a many hundred years process of judges coming up with these rules. And where they come from is human experience shows certain types of evidence is unreliable. Number one that everybody thinks of is hearsay. I can't go to trial and say, well, Jamie said that he saw that dude shoot the victim. Immediate objection. That's hearsay. If I say it, they're going to maybe have a mistrial, right? Because we have learned that me testifying about an out of court's presence witnesses' experiences is so unreliable for a variety of reasons that it is. We are better served in our justice system to ban that type of testimony rather than admit it because it might be helpful. And the reason I bring up hearsay is, what is the Bible? What are the Gospels, if not a mountain of 2,000-year-old hearsay? So sorry, that was my rant about the importance of evidence and what evidence is and isn't. What are your thoughts there, Jamie?
I mean, I come at it a more layperson perspective, obviously, but I get to the same point where anything can be evidence. I absolutely agree with you on that, because people have come to us with all kinds of stuff as evidence for their belief. And I just take evidence as anything that either brings you to a belief or strengthens your belief, a belief in some fact or some perceived truth. So, and it could literally be anything, and that's when we come to like the strength of the evidence, how compelling it is to whomever else is judging it. They say hearsay doesn't compel us very much, but some people are compelled by hearsay, like religious people. And
let's put them in the same category as people who buy timeshares, people who believe TikTok videos. It's not. It's humans tend to respond well to con men. Con men are people who gain your what? Con stands for confidence. A confidence man. They inure confidence because of the tricks they've learned on how to hold themselves. Maybe they're handsome or pretty. They're confident to themselves. And when you combine that with 2,000-year-old knowledge out of a book that you can wave around and say it's been around for 2,000 years, you gain the confidence of a lot of people.
Especially if the evidence aligns with your already preconceived notions about yourself or the world. And I love stories of con men, and I love the movies and shows and stuff about that. But there are certain things that come up that I always take as axioms for myself, where you can't con an honest man. So if someone's actually honest with themselves, they're very difficult to con, because they'll be introspective. And always look a gift horse in the mouth, unless you don't mind it being full with Greek soldiers. So
that's right. That's right. And there's a few more points in this caller before we wrap it up. So I think we addressed it already, but I do want to make it clear. The caller characterized it as believing in atheism. If you are well-read and you understand what atheism is, or what people usually mean by atheism, you'll understand that is a weird concept. It's a nonsense concept. So people do not believe in atheism. They either accept the claim of a particular God or they don't, but they don't believe in atheism. There are people out there who will go further and say, I actively believe that there are no beings or entities in the universe that would qualify, or any other universe, or in all known and unknown space and time, that would qualify as a god, right? And I agree with the caller that if you're making that claim that, hey, this is definitely not true, now you've assumed the burden of proof. The burden of proof is very important. If you are the one making the claim, you need to back it up. So I don't go out here saying there is definitely not a God. I will say there are certain gods that we can use logic to disprove. If there's a God that you believe thinks that the sky is both blue and not blue, or that any given claim is both true and false at the same time without playing word games, right? That something is and is not, that violates one of the three core rules of logic, right? If you believe in a God that does that, I feel comfortable at this point saying that's impossible and it can't exist. So that God, I will say, doesn't exist. But other gods that are less drastic, I will just say, show me the evidence. I'm not convinced, yet. Convince me.
Yeah,
I'm open to being convinced. I don't know about you, Jamie.
I mean, I am too. I want to. I'd like to think so. Like I want to keep an open mind, and I also want to make sure that I'm embodying the idea that skepticism is not synonymous with cynicism. I'm not denying things out of hand. I think a lot of callers that call us think that we're just shooting them down because we won't accept any evidence and everything. You know, we're never ever going to be convinced of anything. I've backed down on certain things, and maybe people in this community might side-eye me for it. Like, I won't argue the kalam anymore because I'll just go, yeah, well, you know, everything must have a cause, therefore there's a first cause, and now where do we get from there? Like, I can't sufficiently argue it. Other people can, so I'll say, yeah, fine. There's a first cause of some kind. How can you then lead me to God? Like, where do we go from a first cause that could just be another naturalistic phenomenon,
right,
to shellfish and butt stuff? You know, it's
as our host J. Mike, who we miss, was unable to be with us today, would say, you give them all the toys,
yep,
and they still can't make the case. It's very true.
Maybe we should get.
I think that leads to one other concept to point out to people, which is the apportionment of belief/skepticism to the claim, right? That if I come to you and say, this is the one I use all the time, I had a tuna fish sandwich for lunch today. You don't know that I had a tuna fish sandwich for lunch today, but you know that there are things called tuna fish and that people make sandwiches out of them and people eat things called lunch. And you know me a bit, and there's no real risk for you accepting that claim as true, right? But then if I came to you and said, oh, and I ate the tuna fish sandwich on a flying saucer piloted by a dinosaur, yeah. Now all of a sudden you're going to be very skeptical about at least those things, right? So the common phrase is, is that you apportion your belief to the evidence, or you can say that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That's why I always use the term sufficient evidence. People will, this guy even used it, proof, the word proof. Proof is a very bad word. Don't use that in arguments. And on either side, talk about sufficient evidence. Is there sufficient evidence to accept the claim as true? And before you get on us about, like, is this how you live your lives? Absolutely. This is how you should live your life too. And you do live your life this way.
Yeah.
When the guy comes to you with the multi-level marketing scheme that he wants you to participate in, or says, hey, if you give me $100,000, I can get my $10 million inheritance out of the bank in Nigeria and give you part. You exercise skepticism. You are skeptical of that. We are skeptics as well. Everybody should be skeptics. It doesn't mean that skeptics don't believe things. It just means we think about apportioning belief to the evidence, that based on the risk, based on the significance, based on what is being claimed and the evidence, should I accept this or not? And I think in America these days, that bar is way too low for a lot of claims. Everything from religion to political stuff to what is a good recipe on TikTok.
Yeah, well, while critical thinking and skepticism do take practice, you can train yourself. Like any skill, once you train yourself enough in it, it becomes intuitive. It's the reason why my computer is not filled with digital hirsifalades, regardless of the sketchiness of the websites I choose to visit. But yeah, I am completely on board with it. Like, you really do just apportion the evidence to the claim, which is why, again, I'm happy to say anything that can even be tangentially proven to be possibly true in the Bible, I'll give it to you. Jordan's a real place. Jesus was probably a real dude. I have no argument against that. But did he die and come back? Can you prove that? Can you evidence that to me? Can you provide me with sufficient evidence that it's possible for someone to come back after 2.5 days of death and be cool and walking around? And
let's realize the definition of death has changed over the last 2,000 years, right? We've gotten really pretty good at detecting death, but it was until recently that we associated with brain activity. It used to be breathing, it used to be motion, it used to be all sorts of things. So when you're dealing with 2,000-year-old, or in the Old Testament, oral tradition dating back to the Bronze Age that was created by goat herders that were illiterate and didn't know where the sun went at night. And then you call in and leave a voicemail like this entitled "The King James Bible is Proof."
Oh yeah, he never mentioned the Bible.
No, he didn't. He was basically saying you should be ashamed of believing these things, believing that there is not a God. But the answer to his ultimate question, if his atheism were to have a low chance of being true, I don't know how to answer that, because there's no chance of me not being convinced of something of being true. But if your question is, if there was a tremendous amount of evidence for the existence of a supernatural being resembling that of the Christian God, would I accept it as true? Yes. The problem is the claim is so extraordinary that it would require such extraordinary evidence that I can't imagine what that evidence would be that would make the existence of the God more likely compared to me hallucinating. I've hallucinated before. I've told a story about recovering from my cancer surgery, 15-hour surgery, started get a new pain meds, and thought the nurses were trying to kill me and all this sort of stuff, and would have sworn under oath, absolutely, this person was trying to steal my wife's purse. Switch the meds back, fine. You can be very, very convinced of something and still not be true. So I prefer the answer I've heard from others on this show, which is, if God is as powerful as most of his believers seem to think he is, then he has the capability to convince me, whatever that may be, writing it on my heart, giving me some sort of evidence, whatever it may be. Go watch the movie Contact or read the novel. That is a great exploration of this space of when is it okay to be personally accept a claim, and when is it okay to then go out and argue about that claim being true. And Jodie Foster's character rides that line perfectly. Sorry, Jamie, go ahead. Let's I think we should bring on Scott at some point.
We have a man in the wings, the inimitable Scott Dickey, who
that's me.
Do you have any opinions on anything that we have encountered this show?
Yeah, actually, I did want to touch on the voicemail, and they kind of snuck it in there. I don't know if you noticed it, but they said if we came up with an actual calculation that shows how low of a percentage or how low of a number between et cetera, and I've seen this argument before, and anybody that's ever presented this argument has never been able to explain how they get that number. Cross-examiner, as you mentioned, how do you get that denominator, right? And so anytime I've ever seen any kind of formulation of this argument, and you do have to dig if you really want to see how they came up with like 1 out of 10 to the 128th or something like that. It's just assumption layered on top of assumption, layered on top of assumption. And then they take all those assumptions and they combine them in ways that also require additional assumptions.
Correct.
And so it's really,
and then they multiply them together. So you have an exponential growth.
Right. And so, if you can't at least provide a basic explanation for an argument, I don't believe that you find that argument compelling. I mean, if you really have no idea how they got this number, then you presenting it adds nothing to the conversation. And so I would love it if somebody would call in and examine that more closely. But like many things in math, I'm a math teacher, so I kind of see this stuff fairly frequently. If you say something with math in it, people's brains will shut down. And so they won't argue against what you're saying, and they won't address what you're saying. And as is obvious from this voicemail, they won't think about it before they repeat it. And so please think about your arguments. If you can't explain it, then I don't believe that it's compelling to you.
I couldn't.
And so I just had to get that out there. Otherwise, I was not going to be able to sleep tonight. So thank you for giving me that chance.
Oh, absolutely. No, I wanted to thank you for being our backup today. We had a change in host at the last minute, and Jamie was able to step in, which was great. And you were able to step in as a backup. It's one of the many examples of the work that goes on behind the scenes at the ACA. So please continue to support us, liking and subscribing. And if you are going to be in the Austin area this weekend, please get your tickets now before they sell out. There's a dozen or so left. And come meet us. I'll be there. Jamie will be there. Scott, I think you're going to be
there. I'll be there.
We'll all be there along with your other favorite hosts. We'll all be there. Take in the scenes. Go out and tell war stories. So, any last words there, Jamie, before we wrap up the show today?
We just don't want you to make an ass of you and Umchin.
I think that should wrap it up. Thanks everybody for watching. Sorry we had a few technical issues, but next week we'll be back with more Atheist Experience. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to stop questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your lies.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.